Imagine spending like $1 billion building the most advanced piece of computing infrastructure on the planet, and then you just turn around and immediately launch this brutal price war against a rival company.
Yeah, a rival company that you actually own a massive stake in.
Right. It sounds like corporate sabotage, honestly. But that is exactly the strategy playing out right now at the absolute bleeding edge of frontier AI. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a wild story.
It really is. Our mission today is to slice straight through the massive hype surrounding Alibaba's newly announced AI model, Qwen 3.8, and basically separate the confirmed technical breakthroughs from some, well, incredibly calculated marketing spin.
And I gotta say, the spin is definitely working. I mean, this announcement has completely hijacked the industry news cycle, but when you look closely at the data they didn't release, a very different picture emerges about what this model actually is.
Yeah, and we are pulling our insights today from a really sharp breakdown by OscarAI. They're a tech journalism outfit that specifically audits these massive AI claims.
Which is so necessary right now.
Completely. And whether you're a solo developer architecting a new app or a tech executive trying to allocate compute budgets or, honestly, just someone tracking the AI space, you need to hear this. Understanding this specific announcement gives you a blueprint for evaluating any new frontier model.
Not to mention the sheer scale of the geopolitical price war happening behind the scenes. It's actively reshaping what you are going to pay for these tools moving forward.
Exactly. We are watching raw technical ambition just collide with high-stakes corporate communication. Alibaba is playing this multi-dimensional game, and the technology itself is, I mean, it's almost secondary to the distribution strategy.
It really is a masterclass in market positioning.
Okay, let's unpack this. How exactly are we supposed to evaluate a massive new model when the creator stands on stage, claims it's the second best model in the entire world, but deliberately hides the actual proof?
Well, you start by analyzing the hard numbers they did release,
Yeah.
right? And then you try to reverse engineer why they hid the others.
All right.
So what is definitively known is that Qwen 3.8, which is currently operating in what they're calling max preview, is just an absolute behemoth. It boasts 2.4 trillion total parameters.
2.4 trillion. That's just wild.
Yeah, and it features native multimodal capabilities, so it's processing text, images, video, and documents concurrently, without needing separate vision encoders bolted on after the fact.
Right. And we're seeing an always-on reasoning mode defaulting to what they call X-high or extra high, paired with a context window of nearly 984,000 tokens, plus a max output of over 131,000 tokens.
Which is a massive output window.
It is. But I want to pause on that context window for a second. We know 1 million tokens allows you to, drop massive code repositories into a single prompt. But historically, models with context windows that large suffer from severe retrieval degradation, like that lost in the middle problem.
Oh, absolutely.
If you feed an AI a 900-page manual, it remembers the first and last chapters, but completely hallucinates the middle. Did OscarAI see any actual proof that Qwen 3.8 maintains perfect recall across that entire million-token span?
That is the million-dollar question. And the short answer is no. I mean, Alibaba claims high retrieval accuracy, but without independent needle in a haystack testing on this specific preview build, a massive context window is just a memory buffer.
It's not a guarantee of comprehension.
Exactly. But to understand the true cost of processing that much data, we really have to look at the architecture. Qwen 3.8 uses a mixture of experts, or MOE design.
Right, which brings us back to that 2.4 trillion parameter count. The best way to visualize an OE architecture is to think of it like a gigantic factory employing 2.4 million specialized workers.
I love this analogy, yeah.
So if a task comes in that requires plumbing, only the plumbers clock in. If it requires electrical work, the dispatchers route the task only to the electricians.
Right, the whole factory isn't working at once.
Exactly. The total headcount is massive, but the active workforce drawing a paycheck at any given millisecond is much smaller.
Yeah.
The routing algorithm decides who works and when.
It's a perfect way to frame it. The efficiency of those dispatchers, the routing network, is everything. And that leads directly to the most glaring omission in Alibaba's announcement.
The missing number.
Yes. They proudly advertised the total factory headcount of 2.4 trillion parameters, but they entirely omitted the active parameters per token. We have no idea how many workers are actually clocking in for each prompt.
And if we look at a comparative baseline, like from the same domestic ecosystem, DeepSeek V4 Pro runs on 1.6 trillion total parameters, but its routing is so aggressive, it only activates about 49 billion parameters per token.
which is incredibly efficient.
Yeah, that's less than 3% of the entire network lighting up at once.
What's fascinating here is that hiding the active parameter count effectively masks the unit economics of the model.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, if Qwen 3.8 activates, say, 15 to 20% of its network to maintain that high reasoning state, the inference overhead would be astronomical. It requires massive VRAM clusters just to hold the weights, let alone actually process the math.
So it's incredibly expensive to run.
Exactly. Without that active number, we just cannot project whether this model is economically viable at scale. Or if Alibaba is just preparing to subsidize the compute cost at a massive loss to capture market share.
They gave us the Billboard vanity metric, but hid the operational burn rate.
Precisely.
And because we can't do the math on the operating costs, we're kind of forced to evaluate the model based on their aggressive performance claims. Which brings us to the quote that set the whole industry on fire.
Yes, the second place claim.
Right. Alibaba claiming Qwen 3.8 is second only to Fable 5 by Anthropic.
I mean, planting your flag right behind Fable 5 is essentially claiming you have the second smartest entity on the planet. Fable 5 is the current gold standard for complex multi-step reasoning.
But they made this claim without publishing a single benchmark table.
Nothing.
No detailed model cards, no third-party audits. It is purely self-reported.
Which completely violates the standard operating procedure of the entire academic AI community.
Yeah, institutions like Stanford HAI demand open, reproducible methodologies. So to understand the leap they're implying here, we have to look at the verified predecessor, Qwen 3.7 Max.
Right, because those scores actually were independently audited.
And they were staggering, like
Yeah.
92.4% on GPQA Diamond, 80.4% on SWU Bench Verified, and 69.7% on Terminal Bench 2.0.
Those are elite metrics, no doubt. But, a high score on a static test doesn't automatically translate to real-world reliability.
Yeah, let's break down why that is, especially with something like SWU Bench, because that isn't just a multiple-choice coding quiz.
Not at all.
To score well, the AI has to autonomously clone a GitHub repository, read a bug report, hunt down the logic flaw across dozens of interdependent files, write a patch, and ensure it passes unit tests.
It's a highly complex, autonomous workflow.
Right. So if 3.7 was already hitting 80% there, 3.8 claiming to be drastically better implies it's bordering on, like, a fully autonomous senior engineer.
And this is exactly where the narrative starts to fracture. Because there are no official tables, the community is just relying on leaks. The Kingbench 3 rumor supposedly places Qwen 3.8 just behind Fable 5 and Opus 4.8.
Which supports their claim on paper.
On paper, yeah. But OscarAI cross-referenced these rumors with reports from actual developers actively stress testing the Qwen 3.8 preview in the trenches.
And the boots-on-the-ground reality is telling a completely different story.
Completely different.
Developers are reporting that while Qwen 3.8 is lightning fast-like, the latency is incredibly low. It feels really fragile when dealing with long-horizon ambiguity.
Yes. So when tasked with a 20-step agentic workflow, it might completely nail the first 14 steps, but then just entirely lose the thread on step 15, causing the whole process to fail.
Some are even saying it handles nuanced reasoning worse than Moonshot's Kimi K3.
Which highlights the compounding error problem in AI agents perfectly. If a model is 99% accurate on a single step but has to take 50 steps autonomously, that 1% error rate just compounds until a failure is almost guaranteed.
And static benchmarks just fail to capture that degradation.
Exactly.
I have to push back on the entire concept of these evaluations then. I mean, if real-world developers building actual software find that the model collapses under the weight of compounding errors in a live terminal, despite acing these doctoral-level benchmarks, shouldn't we just abandon static leaderboards altogether?
It's a very fair question.
It just feels like the benchmarks have become completely detached from the actual utility of the software. It's like hiring a chef because they memorized a recipe book, but when you put them in a busy kitchen during a dinner rush, the whole place burns down.
That is exactly it. You are hitting on the biggest philosophical crisis in AI evaluation today. It's Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
Right, because they're just gaming the test.
Exactly. These labs are training their models on the test data. They optimize for the leaderboards because that's what drives VC funding and props up stock prices.
That makes total sense.
But researchers are increasingly documenting this massive divergence between leaderboard rankings and the actual vibe or utility reported by enterprise users. People deploying these models in messy, undocumented, real-world environments.
So if the benchmarks are potentially gamed and the active parameter economics are hidden, and the real-world performance is, at best, mixed under pressure. Why push this preview out the door right now?
Right.
Why not wait 3 months, lock in the architecture, and release a fully audited model?
Because the release wasn't dictated by the engineering team. It was dictated by the geopolitical and corporate chessboard. The timing is actually the real story here.
Okay, break that down for us.
Alibaba unleashed this Qwen 3.8 announcement exactly 2 days after Moonshot AI launched Kimi K3, which is a 2.8 trillion parameter model that briefly held the crown for the largest open weights release.
2 days. That is a calculated interception. They purposely stepped right on Moonshot's news cycle.
Absolutely they did. You combine that with Zipu AI dropping GLM 5.2 and DeepSeek continually optimizing their routing algorithms, and you just have this brutal four-way domestic war for developer mindshare.
It's intense.
These Chinese labs are moving at a velocity that honestly makes Silicon Valley look sluggish.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If Alibaba is fighting tooth and nail to bury Moonshot AI's launch, why does Alibaba own a 36% stake in Moonshot?
Right, it seems crazy.
According to the OscarAI breakdown, they are a massive financial backer of the very company they are actively trying to crush in the press. Why fund your own executioner?
Because you have to stop looking at Alibaba as a software developer and start looking at them as an infrastructure platform. Their strategy mirrors the venture capital model of massive tech conglomerates.
Meaning they don't actually care who wins the race.
Exactly. They don't care which specific model wins the leaderboard. They care about who owns the underlying compute, the cloud hosting, and the developer ecosystem. By funding Moonshot while simultaneously building Qwen, they are hedging their bets to ensure that no matter who builds the smartest model, the API calls are flowing through Alibaba's data centers.
Wow. So they want to be the AWS of the AI era. It's just a pure platform play.
100%.
And to take that a step further, the OscarAI piece highlights the Apple Intelligence integration, which really brings this entire strategy into focus.
This is the linchpin of the whole aggressive rollout. Recently, Alibaba secured regulatory approval from Beijing to become the official technology partner for Apple Intelligence in China.
Think about the scale of that for a second. Every single time a user in China asks their iPhone a query that is too complex for local on-device processing, that data gets routed straight into Alibaba's cloud infrastructure.
Yep. It is a frictionless, guaranteed distribution pipeline to hundreds of millions of users.
And servicing that pipeline requires an infrastructure capable of handling just astronomical concurrency with incredibly low latency.
Exactly. And that guaranteed commercial volume is what justifies burning billions of dollars to train models like Qwen 3.8.
So the rushed preview makes sense now.
When you factor in the Apple deal, the Rust launch makes complete strategic sense. It wasn't a product launch at all. It was a signaling exercise.
Yep.
They dominated the news cycle, they reassured Apple and their investors that they hold the cutting edge, and they completely neutralized Moonshot's momentum, all without having to actually commit to final open weights licensing or stable pricing.
It really is a masterclass in narrative control. But let's bring this out of the boardroom and down to the terminal layer. With all this strategic maneuvering, the unverified claims, the hidden parameter counts, what is the actual impact on the listener?
The developer building the tool.
Right. If someone is tuning in right now and they're architecting a SaaS platform or optimizing an internal workflow, what does this massive corporate war actually mean for them?
It means they are the beneficiaries of a massive race to the bottom for inference costs.
Oh, because the competition is so fierce.
Exactly. The price of intelligence is just collapsing. While Alibaba hasn't released the standard production pricing for Qwen 3.8 yet, they've made the preview endpoint available via their token plan for roughly 10% of the expected standard rate.
10%. It's a total aggressive loss leader strategy.
Yeah.
To really grasp how distorted this pricing is, look at the previous generation, Qwen 3.7 Max. It operates at $1.25 per million input tokens and $3.75 per million output tokens.
Now compare that to Western models. Fable 5, the model Alibaba claims to be directly competing with, charges $10 per million input tokens and a massive $50 per million output tokens.
$50 compared to $3.75.
Yeah.
I mean, that isn't just a discount. That fundamentally alters what kind of business models are even possible.
Oh, complete. Like, if you are building a B2C application that generates massive amounts of text, maybe an automated tutoring system or some heavy data synthesis tool running, that on Fable 5 might literally bankrupt you in a week based on the output costs alone. But running it on Qwen changes your gross margins entirely. Even domestic rivals like Kimi K3 are charging $3 for input and $15 for output. Alibaba is purposefully crashing the market price of AI to starve out competitors who just don't have their deep pockets.
He is ruthless.
It is, but this price compression unlocks entirely new markets. OscarAI pointed out that developers in emerging tech hubs, places like Latin America, Southeast Asia, or Eastern Europe, who were previously completely priced out of using frontier-level reasoning, well, now they have access to top-tier capabilities for pennies.
And Alibaba made adopting this capability incredibly frictionless, too. Qwen's API is designed to be perfectly compatible with both OpenAI and Anthropic formats.
Which is such a brilliant tactical move. The switching cost for developers is practically zero.
So what does this all mean? It means if you have a complex application already built around OpenAI's API structure, you don't need to spend 3 weeks refactoring your code base to test Qwen 3.8.
Not at all.
You literally just swap the endpoint URL, drop in a new API key, and you can dynamically route queries to Qwen. You could even build a hot swapping router that sends simple tasks to a cheap open source model and routes complex reasoning tasks to Qwen, all without changing your core application logic.
The flexibility really is incredible, but OscarAI included a very strict warning regarding the specific release, and I think it is vital from anyone listening who manages enterprise systems.
Yeah, do not put this preview endpoint in your production pipeline.
Under no circumstances. A max preview endpoint is highly volatile. Alibaba explicitly notes that model behaviors, reasoning thresholds, and even the API structure itself could shift without warning as they finalize the architecture.
So if you hook this up to a live customer-facing product, a silent update on Alibaba's end could break your entire application overnight.
Exactly. Use that seamless API compatibility to run it in a sandbox. Build your own internal evaluations using your specific, messy, proprietary data.
Don't just rely on the King Bench 3 rumors.
And definitely don't rely on Alibaba's slide deck. If your agent needs to reliably execute a 20-step debugging workflow, force Qwen 3.8 to do it 100 times and measure the exact failure rate yourself.
That is the crucial takeaway here. We are in an era where the hype cycle moves so fast that previews are marketed as industry-defining breakthroughs. You just have to develop the institutional discipline to ignore the noise, demand reproducible data, and run rigorous localized stress tests before trusting any of these frontier models with your business logic.
Well said.
Let's pull all this together. Qwen 3.8 is undoubtedly a staggering engineering achievement. I mean, building a 2.4 trillion parameter multimodal network with an WAIC high reasoning mode is pushing the boundaries of what silicon can do.
Absolutely.
If they follow through and release the open weights, it will fundamentally shift the open source landscape. But until Alibaba pulls back the curtain, until they publish the true active parameter counts, release the model cards, and subject the system to independent verifiable benchmarks, that seconds to Fable 5 claim remains nothing more than a highly effective corporate marketing strategy.
It really is narrative warfare. But building on what we just discussed about the collapsing inference costs and the seamless API compatibility, I want to leave you with a broader thought about where this entire industry is actually heading.
I'm all ears.
If massive models like Qwen are aggressively driving the cost of top-tier intelligence down to practically zero, and they are intentionally mimicking the exact API structures of OpenAI and Anthropic so developers can swap them out effortlessly, we might actually be looking at the end of the smartest model era.
What you need what exactly?
Meaning AI intelligence is rapidly becoming completely commoditized, exactly like electricity. When you plug a server into the wall, you don't care which power plant generated the electrons, right? You just need the server to turn on. If intelligence becomes virtually free, perfectly interchangeable at the API level, and instantly accessible, then having the model that scores 2% higher on a doctoral science exam won't actually provide a competitive moat.
The intelligence itself just becomes a background utility.
Precisely. In a world where the intelligence is a free commodity flowing through the pipes, the only things that will actually matter are latency, infrastructure, and ecosystem distribution.
Which brings us right back to the Apple intelligence deal and the Moonshot investments.
Exactly.
Alibaba doesn't care if they hold first, second, or third place on a static leaderboard. They are subsidizing the cost of the electricity because they intend to own the entire power grid. They want every query, every developer, and every device routing through their servers.
It completely reframes how we should be evaluating these announcements. We shouldn't just be asking, how smart is it? We really need to be asking, what infrastructure is it designed to lock us into?
That is a phenomenal lens to view this through. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep running your own tests, never take a benchmark at face value, and remember that when the cost of intelligence approaches zero, the real product being sold is the ecosystem. We'll catch you next time.